This is the Shadow Chronicles podcast. We are here to take a deep dive into the inner work, generational trauma, and your shadows. Having those hard conversations so you don't have to. You know, all of that shit that just does not get spoken about. In the third drawer down, in the dark, hidden away. My name is Sky, and I'm a shadow integration specialist. I am here to help guide you on your journey to unfuck yourself by integrating your shadows, healing the generational trauma, so you can vibrate with confidence and just fucking love your life.
And my name is Todd, who's an integrative health coach. I help people own more of who they are, change their lives on many different levels to become who they really are. Find your compass and follow it, to say it simply.
And welcome back. This is episode 6 of the Shadow Chronicles podcast. Yay! And this is going to be series 1, part 1, whatever you want to call it, as we start to take a deep dive into boundaries in all shapes and all forms.
As an aside, did you know that most podcasts don't make it past 5 episodes?
Fucking winning. We got to 6.
Right? What was it? You know what? It might not be that. I might be thinking of mixed up numbers there.
Okay.
It takes you 5 episodes to figure out what the fuck you're actually talking about.
Oh, so we know what the fuck we're talking about now?
Allegedly.
Right. Okay.
But, you know, I think we've made it past a certain level of milestone.
I think so too.
Given all the mapping out we've been doing of what we want to talk about, you'd like to think we'd have some idea of what we're talking about.
Oh, man, you should see our brain dump page.
It's not that long. It's only 7 pages.
Maybe. Okay, so let's take a dive in today of when we should be placing boundaries down, what is an actual boundary, and sort of like
what that looks like.
What's that looks like?
Yeah.
You know, what is a reason to, you know, put up with behaviour that doesn't make you comfortable and what's not?
And how to deal with the pushback that you're inevitably going to get from setting one, because you will.
Right.
From yourself and from other people.
Yeah, definitely. Especially if you are very new to boundary work and just starting placing boundaries down or starting to self-abdicate.
Realising that you just need some.
Right. I
think we briefly touched on it last episode. We were sort of talking about the idea that boundaries work in both directions. Like sometimes the boundary is to protect your energy from who you're dealing with.
Yeah.
But sometimes the boundary is to protect them from what you're dealing with.
Exactly. And I think at the end of the day, like, you know, whether you want to call it trauma, whether you want to call it your conditioning, you know, your upbringing, whatever the case may be, but those things are not excuses for you to be putting up with shitty behaviour. There's a level of difference between...
Yeah. So they are excuses, but how long do you want them to be excuses?
Right.
It's like a good excuse leaves room for a bad excuse, which leaves room for no excuse at all. And then all you're doing is projecting your bullshit or having someone project their bullshit onto you. And that's ultimately what boundaries are for. It's like the more you're not present with what's actually going on as opposed to the justification or the rationalization of what's going on, and the more those excuses are no longer, worthy of you.
Yeah.
The more you start to notice the behaviors that stem from that, then hopefully sort of recognize that they don't serve you anymore, coming or going.
Yeah, most definitely. I heard a quote, and it was on a podcast, and I can't remember what it's called now, but it's something that I use a lot now to try and describe this because, you know, everyone is going through something. You know, everyone has their own pattern, their own conditioning, their own programming, what that is, whether that's healthy, whether that's not healthy, whether that's toxic, you know, whether that's abusive. Everyone has it, but, you know, you shouldn't drown yourself in 3 feet of water for someone that won't stand up in it. And essentially that means is using the excuse of I'm like this because of my dad, or I'm like this because of my mum, or, this is just who I am, you need to deal with it, is complete and utter fucking bullshit. But on the flip side of that, if someone's actively working on themselves, which ultimately is going to be bringing up a lot of trauma responses, triggers, emotional dysregulation, because, you've just opened fucking Pandora's box and everything's come out, and, you're feeling everything all at once. When you're actively doing something to work through the shit that doesn't serve you anymore, it has a level of grace from the other person, the people around you, all of those sort of things, because they can see they're like, okay, well, at least this person's trying. They're not using their behaviour as their past or their, pain or their traumas as an excuse to treat someone else poorly. They're so reactive right now because they're trying to fucking figure shit out in their head.
Yeah, they're learning.
They're learning that they are honestly not meaning to, and they are taking accountability and, apologising on all of those sort of things. So there's a different level of where you would then go, well, what is someone working on themselves, and what is someone just using something as an excuse to, be a fuckhead?
That, absolutely. If you can see someone investing time, effort and energy into their own growth and progression and sort of doing the healing, then, as you say, there's that grace, there's that patience, there's that tolerance. But that is also reliant on you being in a position to recognize that for what it is, as opposed to someone who's trying to heal and you just seeing the continued lashing out, for lack of a better way to describe it, that may or may not be different or less frequent from the person who's trying to do the healing. So there's an incumbence on the person who's sort of on the other side of it that wants to have the patience and tolerance to be able to be self-aware enough about what they're seeing as well. Yeah. So like it's that conversation about communication. It's like, who's more important in this communication? Is it the speaker or the listener? Because if the listener of the adjusting behavior isn't there to see it for what it is and the progression that it is, then it just kind of just continues to refract and sort of perpetuate old bullshit.
Yeah, definitely. I would also then ask or even get really curious if, as you said, the listener of the,
the receiver of the behavior.
Yeah,
yep, that'll do.
However it works. If they are at a place where they're still unaware of actually what's going on and all of those sort of things, then I would then argue that they are now being incredibly triggered by all of the things that are coming up for them, all of the work that they need to do, all of those sort of things. And there may be a conversation there where it's like, well, hang on a minute, who's the one that's actually using things as excuses and not?
I guess in relevance to one of the first things you said, everyone's going through something.
Yeah.
Now, whether it's your own turmoil that is brought about by how you're being treated by a significant other or something like that. There's another old quote. The idea is that your partner is the one who shows you where you need to heal the most.
100%.
It's extremely difficult to do any healing if you're not in that proverbial safe space with someone who's done enough healing to hold that space for you, or is going through at least a similar enough thing and can allow you to have your own grace because they know hopefully that you understand that they need that from you too.
Yeah.
Change happens on 3 levels: self, others, and environment. So you can do all the inner work you like, but if the people around you continue to assume that you're still who you used to be, they will continue to trigger and maybe not negate all of the healing that you've done, but it kind of almost cheapens it in a way. Like, just no one's ever going to treat me like the new person that I am. Why am I fucking bothering?
Yeah.
Or you turn up to a workplace where Sharon and Dave are still being like colossal bellends and sending you to HR all the time because you keep flipping them off because they keep shitting on your desk or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah.
That's probably slightly more serious than a HR department.
Just a tiny
referral,
bit.
But
just a tiny bit. But yeah, that's it. So then you would also want to have, like, even if it's conversation with yourself, because as you said, like, if it is things like environment that are going to be proverbially pulling you back down, you know, what conversation do you need to have with yourself about, well, is this environment good for me? Is this where I need to be right now to, you know, get where I'm going? Or is this going to inevitably hold me back and keep me in those cycles?
So what you're saying is that it's not just that the others around you, you want them to have that patience and tolerance and hold that space. But you've got to hold that space and tolerance and patience with yourself.
Yes.
Knowing that there's going to be people and environmental triggers.
Yeah.
Well, that absolutely, because that's that conversation. Like, the boundaries work coming and going. So if you're not setting boundaries around yourself and for yourself.
Yeah, in the environments that you're in the environments that you put yourself in, you know, when you're moving through something, when you're creating change, when you're doing the healing work, whatever the case may be, and you keep going back to places that are, you know, representing the old you in quotation marks, so who you're trying to move away from, you're ultimately going to loop yourself back in.
You're poking that ulcer in your own damn mouth and you're just hurting yourself.
You know, so it's like, you know, as you said, placing that boundary around, well, these people or this place is not suited to what I'm doing for myself right now. I need to either place a boundary down to say, like, I'm not going to interact with those until I'm in a space where I can differentiate, because, that's the one I'm looking for.
I knew what you meant. It's fine.
My dyslexic brain's going, you're making me work.
There's letters and they do stuff.
Until you're in a space where you can potentially go in and out of that. Something that I don't tend to recommend, because if you, like, as we've spoken about in previous episodes, when we create change, when we move, we transcend levels of energy. Mm-hmm. If you move back down a level and stay there for too long, you will return to that level of energy without any sort of moving out of it.
See, I was going to say, like, you sort of mentioned the idea of, like, what you're going through right now.
Yeah.
I agree. But I also like to ask people, like, how well established and firm and conscious are your boundaries? Mm. It's not that you want to go back into that scenario that used to trigger you, but your ability to be able to go into that scenario and remember that's not who you are anymore. You are in that place, you are in that space, you are with those people, but you are sufficiently transcended to recognize that for what it is. This is a temporary thing. This is not an ongoing thing. These are not necessarily your people anymore.
Yeah.
But you don't have to be walking around going, you're all like lower-minded troglodyte scum. And I'm going to burn this place down if you don't shut up about it.
Right.
You don't have to go quite to that level, but like
that's like the pendulum swung the whole ass other direction.
Yeah. So I guess, like, I'd be arguing that, like, bigger picture, long-term sort of stuff, that your sense of self, your boundaries around who and what you are and who you let into your life will get strong enough to the point where it doesn't matter where you are. Now that's a little while away when you, and that's why I was sort of saying, like what you said, like right now. It's like when you're first figuring this stuff out, you don't want to be anywhere near that place.
Right. That's it.
Those people, because it's just your neurology, your subconscious, your patterning just wants to go back into what is familiar and right.
Yeah. Your pathways are not changed enough and compounded in enough to know to step back out again.
Yeah. And that's why I'm sort of making the point is like when you are sufficiently conscious and intentful about who you are and what that actually looks like on that bigger picture level. So even if you do go back into that environment and you're who you used to be, the ability to recognize that that is this small little tiny sliver of the huge big sky pie that you are, that it's a small part of you that you don't have to live in anymore.
Yeah.
It hopefully takes a bit of pressure off that as well because you've established a level of discipline around who you really are.
Yeah.
To not get sucked in.
Yeah, to not allow environment, other people, all of those sort of things to manipulate you into something else.
You can go into the bucket of crabs again, but you're now an eagle, so you can just fly out again. It's fine. Yeah. Like that analogy? It was terrible, wasn't it?
Can we just say you pulled that out of your butt from like somewhere?
Yeah. You just like you're not a crab anymore. Yeah. You can get back out.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean you can't be in the said crab bucket periods of time. This kind of comment, it usually seems particularly relevant when you're, say, cleaning up your diet or something.
Yeah.
So you're trying to establish boundaries around how and why you eat the things that you eat.
Yeah. This is coming from someone that has an extremely unusual, no, it's not unusual, but, you know.
It's unusual. You can say it.
Don't worry.
But you have this conversation about, like, sometimes you just need to say, get all that shit that you don't want to eat out of the house because you do not want the temptation. You don't want the capacity for that little voice in the back of your head that's going, Sky, eat me, like that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Just get it out of the house because then you can establish enough space in your own head to be able to progressively go, I don't do that.
Yeah.
This is not who I am anymore.
That's it.
And then depending on how you really feel about it, what kind of established relationship or newly established relationship you have with food, for example.
Yep.
You can then have it in the house because you know you've got a level of discipline and self-assurance and healthy relationship with food that it can be in the house and it's fine. Maybe not good, but fine.
Yeah.
Long-winded one, wasn't it?
That's okay.
Yeah.
So that's more like boundaries around yourself in what you are doing and why and the things that you may need to remove from your life for a period of time. So coming back into, let's say, you know, you're in a relationship with somebody, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a romantic relationship, you know, whatever that looks like to you, because you know, they all come with their own commencements of boundaries, non-negotiables, things.
That they may or may not be aware of, let alone vocalise to you.
Right, that's it.
Get to that.
And you have the person that's, like, as we mentioned beforehand, doing the work, healing, it's open Pandora's box, it's very reactive. And then we've got the other person, as you said, is just like maybe they're not self-aware and they're just kind of copying all of the crap and they're like, what the actual fuck? Because obviously it's triggering everything within them as well.
Yeah. You make me feel bad for not working on myself. How dare you?
Right. Fucking, how many times have I heard that?
Well, as you were describing, I was like, tell me how many times you've dealt with this in your practice, Sky, and I'll see if I can bring my knife to a gunfight. Because, yeah, it happens.
Oh, mate.
A lot.
Right. family seems to be the fucking worst for it. I just want everything to go back to the way it was.
No, you want everything to be the same so that you don't have to adapt and change and grow and evolve.
Yeah.
Because that takes effort and it wasn't your decision, so why would I do that?
Exactly. So if we're in that situation where it's like this, you know, the person's making the change and the person that's, you know, resistant, I guess, non-self-aware, however you want to call it, you know, so it's like, I just want things to go back the way they were. I just want to change. So when we can look at it from that aspect, that's not necessarily, it can be, but it's not necessarily say, you know, they're using their trauma as an excuse to treat you poorly. It's more of a case of this person's been like triggered the absolute fuck because
they're using their comfort.
Yeah.
To try and keep things the same.
You know, and and that essentially in some way, shape or form is the same. Is as this is just how I am, you just need to deal with it type thing. Or, you know.
Like sometimes that's true. It's like there's something fundamental about who you are that requires your acceptance and the acknowledgement of the people around you. But I think we talked about this briefly before. Like I personally would argue that those things are rarely things that upset other people. Not exclusively, but like it's those things that like the things that you find funny. Like how many people are going to hold that against you because that's your sense of humor, as opposed to saying offensive, racist, sexist jokes and going, you're just going to have to accept it. It's like, oh, okay, well, they don't have to accept your bullshit either.
No, that's it. Did you go into tangent land there?
I did, and I had a thing I wanted to say, and it's gone.
And it's gone.
And it's going to come back about 40 minutes after we press stop. Maybe. Anyway.
So where in the case then is just like having that patience, having that grace for someone that is going through something and all of the shit's coming up and they're just all over the fucking place and don't know what to do about it, or they're trying to work through it.
Remembered it.
Oh, yay. I knew if I talked long enough.
This is more a philosophical point than anything, but we as humans, we use the things outside of us to continually frame who we are, how life works, all that sort of stuff. So when you mention like family being like one of the worst for like, I just want things to go back the way they were, it's because what they are going through is something that is so integral to how they frame themselves in the world and how it works, that
how they view life.
You are literally breaking down one of the boundaries by which they encase themselves in their own, that comfort, that safety of who they are and why that matters. Yeah. So as soon as you start to change things, you are threatening their ego in terms of who they self-identify as. So that like that's why they don't like it. Yeah. It's like, I just want things to go back so I can feel normal. And it's, when I say normal, it's that proverbial box. It's like maybe it's work, maybe it's family, maybe it's partner, maybe it's kids, or maybe it's sport or whatever sort of thing. Like you see it a lot with sports. Like someone retires and they don't have that central tethering point to who they are anymore. And they're like, well, what do I do now? Who am I now? Yeah. Because Sky's decided she doesn't want to tolerate my bullshit anymore about how tall she isn't. She's like, that's uncalled for and unnecessary. How dare you? And I'm like, but that was the fundamental part of how I interacted with her. What do I talk to her about now if I can't give a shit about how tall she isn't? And then our whole relationship changed, and I'm like, I'm fucking salty.
How are you salty considering I was the one that copped all the short memes?
Hypothetically.
Do you know what I copped this morning from like the other tall friend?
Mm-hmm.
I love you, my teacup.
Yeah, well, I wasn't there when she wrote that. But
No, I got that this morning,
yeah,
like at 7 o'clock this morning.
Your mate.
Right.
I didn't tell her to do that.
Oh
I think she might have been feeling a bit guilty about sending you that meme. But all of that to be an example of if Sky sets a boundary about how much shit she chooses not to cop about her height or otherwise.
We're just going to harp on about how tall I'm not. I know I'm small.
Why are you so defensive, Sky?
Because I'm small?
The point being that Sky sets a boundary, so I have to readjust my own. And it's so rare that people want to do that.
Mm.
And that's why it's necessitating me having a certain amount of, I want to grow and heal and progress so that I can hold the space so that Sky gets comfortable with how tall she is or isn't. And I get more comfortable with who she's becoming.
Yeah. Not taller, that's for sure.
Oh, there's surgeries. They are expensive and horrific, and
Yeah, I'm cool.
they look super uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But all of that to say that when your boundaries around who you are and what you think and all that sort of carry on are challenged, that's why you get the pushback. And that's why when you're growing and reestablishing boundaries, you got to stop my saltiness impacting on your comfortability with your verticality. Fancy enough words to make it less harsh.
Sure. Still small.
Was that an awkward conversation to have about my terrible analogy?
I just love how you just threw my height under the bus. Like, cool.
Feel free to throw it back. How dare you be a lanky giraffe, man?
That's okay. Ooh. Please excuse that I just like completely knocked something over then.
Who would have imagined that someone with relatively short limbs could fling them around enough to knock stuff over? Should we leave you alone now?
Yeah.
Should we get on with it?
Can we? So to recap,
It was only a 5-minute tangent. It's fine.
to make sure we understand. So when someone creates a change or makes a change, and then that, rocks someone else's model of the world, whether it's family, whether it's partners, whether it's friendships, situationships, whatever the case may be.
Whatever ship.
A ship. And so that rocks the model of the world to somebody else. And all of a sudden...
And it will.
And it will, because that's it. All of a sudden, all the things that they had deemed nice and safe and comfortable and all those sort of things, all of a sudden are not so nice and safe and comfortable because someone else is, creating waves, rocking the boat, tall poppy syndrome, whatever the fuck you want to call it. You have to sort of look at what proverbial boundaries have been sort of broken around that person's model of the world, but then also look and go, well, the one doing the work, am I willing to stop doing the work to placate them? Or am I now have hit that point where it's like, well, I don't want to put up with that shitty behaviour. Do I need to go, well, I need to place a boundary down, whether it's with the person around the environment, and the third one's like escaped me, but
Self, others, and environment.
Self, others, environment. Yeah, so others, self, and then environment around what I'm going to do now. And that's never comfortable when you are like, well, all of this stuff that I'm doing now no longer fits this version and everyone else inside this version. So now I have to look at what I'm willing to do to protect myself and my energy and where I want to go.
So it's a thing that you've said. Shadow work is the ultimate expression of self-love.
Right.
That's what we're talking about now, is the ability to sort of recognize that what does your version of self-love look like? Because how much you want to change is dependent on that, and how much you will or won't placate the people around you is dependent on that too.
Yeah.
So like, how essential is this level of change to become who you are, knowing that how you feel about yourself and who you know you are capable of being is entirely dependent on what path you choose or how extreme a version you prescribe to.
Mm-hmm.
Are you more important than the relationship, for example?
Yeah.
And, you know, without wanting to throw her under the bus again, that's a thing that Sky's got a few stories about. I think all of us do, really. Right. I know I do.
Yeah.
It's like I've had a couple of long-term relationships that I'm not in anymore because I was no longer that person, and neither were they.
Yeah. We have to get to a point where we choose ourselves.
The idea being that if you're not yourself, like, what are you really offering the person on the other side of that conversation apart from that familiarity and comfortability period?
Yeah.
I swear this will be a short tangent. When couples break up, for example, it's my experience that most women will say, oh, he never changed. And most guys will say, oh, she changed. Guys want her to stay the same. Girls want him to change.
Ooh, right.
All right, we're not going to go into the depth of that.
Oh.
Not today. But like, what happens if there's that balance of masculine and feminine sort of things? Like, men want a level of certainty. They want some consistency so they can black and white the world and plan ahead.
Yep.
That's what, in theory, masculinity is for. Whereas women want that space to grow and nurture and become more, to blossom, to bloom, or all of the above.
Yeah.
Theoretically, that's what femininity is for. But then when you're having this conversation, if you're that party in the couple that wants to grow,
yeah,
I guess is why I brought up the self-love things. Like, if you're not in a position to sort of love yourself enough that growth is more important than the person who wants things to stay the same, do you love them enough to ignore your growth stemming from self-love?
I would even argue that
it's not. All right.
It's not.
That's not a fun conversation to have with yourself. It's like,
but it's, you know, like, do you love them enough to ignore your own self-love? And
because that's what it boils down to.
Right.
It's like, if you're not the central focal point of your life, how are you loving them to the best of your ability anyway?
Well,
or let alone, how can they love you in the fullness of you?
Yeah. You know, and like, just like the quote is saying, it's like, you can only love to the capacity that you love yourself.
Which is kind of a big deal, guys. Just saying.
You know, so when you say that you love someone more, well, how can you? Because you can, like, if you're not willing to love yourself to that same extent, which means change and growth, it's not a place of love then. It's a place of validation. I'm glad you said it that way.
Because as soon as you're like, how can you? It's like, well, how can you? It's because you've misconstrued love with
validation.
Comfortability. Validation is the best word, but like whatever other framing you sort of want to call it, like validation, comfortability, like just the assurance that someone loves you even though you're a piece of shit and you know it. You just don't tell anyone except for yourself that. It's a bit harsh, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And this is kind of why it's a very challenging conversation to have with yourself, because you're trying to balance out who you were and all the things that did genuinely matter with who you are and are becoming, and why that matters as well. And like that, it's not a 20-minute conversation with a definitive black and white answer. It's years of, as much as people don't want to hear it, it's often years of progressive growth and inner work and trial and error.
Yep.
And fingers crossed you've got someone sitting across the table from you who wants to do the same thing because they want to be there to see how fucking epic you really are, and vice versa. That is not to be heard as, if they're not as willing to grow as you are, that you need to dump them. That's not taking that level of responsibility on with this conversation.
No, but there's a level of conversation you need to have with yourself about what is actually going on, you know. So I find, like, for myself, even is like, that is the conversation that I've had to have. Like, I've decided that I didn't want to be XYZ anymore. And that meant for me needing to go into therapy. It meant needing to look in myself. It meant needing to integrate shadows. It meant needing all of those sort of things. And ultimately, the relationships I had around me dissolved because, one, I wasn't willing to go back to who I used to be, and the people that were around me in the relationships that did dissolve did not accept the boundaries that I had placed, to say that, no, I wasn't going to put up with this kind of behaviour or this treatment or that, or, you know, the whole like, oh, they're your mum, or oh, they're your dad, or
people, you know, do not give back power.
No.
And that sounds pretty melodramatic, but that's exactly what we're talking about. Like, there's a control drama and a power dynamic that will come along with boundary setting, that people, that's, you know, like, you're changing things. Like, I don't want to give away my ability to sort of assume that you're this person and then press buttons accordingly. That doesn't seem very much fun at all.
No.
If I said that at least initially the work is figuring out which things are you and which things are learned behavior and taken on traumas and the conditioning, all this sort of stuff. So like the, you know, like, oh, you should just accept me who I am sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes that is true, but recognizing which bits are you and which bits are who you were trained to be.
Yeah. So when I was doing a lot of my certifications and stuff, and that was it, one of the things that really stuck with me as well is like, the person is the person and the behaviour is the behaviour. The behaviour is not the person.
Write that down, guys. It's a big freaking deal.
You
the
know,
person's not the behaviour is not the person.
Exactly. But if you identify with the behaviour as the person, you know, like, I'm just angry and I break shit because I was because of how I grew up. Well, then you're going to be angry and you break shit. But you can't get angry then when people go, well, I'm terribly sorry, but
you're not having you in my house next to my Ming Dynasty like porcelain collection.
But I don't want to be around that behaviour.
Yeah.
You know, and so like as you said, it's a process of going, well, what behaviors aren't serving me and what behaviors will serve me, and what do I want and what does that look like and what does that feel like, and how do I become that? And a lot of the times you become what you want by letting go of behaviors and things and people as well that are not serving you. When you realize that you're like, oh, this behavior is not me. I am a whole ass other person outside this behavior. I can just let that go.
That.
Yeah. I don't need to have that. Or I can express that in a completely different way if I'm angry or if I'm sad or if I have fear.
Or I can process my emotions instead of just vent them.
Yeah.
Which, you know, sometimes is part of processing. But there's this idea that 95% of your personality is coping mechanisms. And that 5% of you is core you. And that everything else is an extrapolated version of how you manage yourself and protect yourself and deal with the world at large. And what we're realistically talking about now is the necessity of occasionally burning down that 95% of that scaffolding and just completely remapping it and going, what do I actually, like, if I'm certain that this 5-ish% is me, they're arbitrary numbers, guys, don't worry. But if 5% of you is you, and you want to change, it might be necessary to like burn a whole bunch of stuff down and go, none of this serves me anymore. And even if some did, is it built off the back of old bullshit that may be sort of perpetuating fear-based behaviors, for example, that don't feel fearful. But when you sort of like really peel back, you've realized that the root cause of that is a dot-pointed like progression to get to this point where I was about to tell another tangential story where I cut the end off a roast and I don't know why. I'm going to have to give you that story now, aren't I? Because otherwise it's too weird.
Oh, what?
Conversation with a friend of mine. She made a roast dinner once. She always cuts the end off it.
Okay.
And I asked her why. She said, I don't know. I'll ring Mum. She rings her mum.
Mum didn't know?
Why do you cut the end off the roast? I don't know. I'll ring my mum. And grandmother said, because the bloody roast didn't fit the oven, so I had to cut the end off. But this is why that self-awareness and that like joining the dots is necessary. It's like if you've got a whole bunch of behaviors, you're like, why the fuck am I doing that?
Yeah.
Whether it serves you or not. Like if you're not living with a level of intention and purpose, it's like, well, even if it's not like even if it's not like a fear or scarcity orientated mindset or something like that,
yeah.
If there's a level of ignorance to it, like it's still worth exploring. Like, how does this serve me? It's like, could you imagine cutting off a quarter of your roast and not cooking it and then going,
why do I do that?
Why do I do that?
Yeah.
Could have been eating that epic roast. It's just rude to yourself.
Yeah.
Like, especially when there's no tangible reason that actually you've got an oven that's big enough for the roast. It's like so dumb. But it's not, you don't know it's dumb until you actually look at it for what it is.
Yeah. You know, all you've done is then copy and copy a behavior that you watched or learnt or whatever else without any. When you copy and learn and model things, there is no reason to why it until you start going back down the line and going, well, why do I do this?
Yeah.
Or
like how do you talk to yourself?
Yeah.
How do you interact with your loved one? Do you constantly give them shit about being short? That seems uncalled for. And she's laughing, but
you're not letting that go, are you? Come on, leave my baby 5.2 ass alone.
You keep laughing.
It's okay. I get short jokes all the time.
But it's incumbent on me to either listen to the boundaries that you have around that or examine it and go, is that actually how I want to talk to my friend's guy?
Yeah.
Do I want her to sort of think that the only way I can interact with her is by hilariously insulting her. And just because it's funny and just because she laughed doesn't make it okay.
Yeah.
That's not the friend I choose to be.
Mm.
In her defense and in my defense, I'm using them as examples today, and this is why it keeps coming back up. But it's like, why would I choose to talk to my person like that?
Yeah. Why would you choose to treat your person like that?
Why would you choose to talk to yourself like that?
Right.
Because, like, in a very real way,
Yeah.
it could be argued that everything that you see spilling out and the old lash out effects, the projection of like that's what? The spillover effects of what's actually going on within that person. And that's why we kind of want to have some of that patience tolerance. It's like, you cop it in the face, but you want to have a modicum of empathy to go, what's going on for them? That's what's coming out.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
That's it. And that takes a level, and, you know, and this is where, like, as you said, like this conversation around, well, is the person actually doing work on themselves or not? Because if you are copping shit in the face and the other person is not doing anything to correct behaviour or change the behaviour or do anything else, that's like an entirely...
They might be saying they are,
but they're not.
But literally nothing's changed in I don't know how long.
Exactly.
It's like you've got your own fuse to run as well. Like, if you haven't seen any change in 6 months, it's like, all right, well,
what the fuck?
Well, look,
or even some sort of effort of like, you know, smacking in the face and then going, oh fuck, I didn't mean to do that, sorry.
And owning it.
And owning it, you know, and stuff like that. But if you're constantly smacking shit getting smacked in the face, then there needs to be also that level of conversation with that person to say, hey, I'm not okay with that behaviour, and watch what happens. Because if they have any sort of level of self-awareness, they're going to go...
Or give a fuck about you whatsoever.
Or give a fuck about you whatsoever. They're going to go, okay, I can totally see how you would feel like that. I totally did not intend to do that. My bad. I will do better to regulate my emotions or whatever, or communicate what's actually going on. Whatever fucking thing that they come up with.
Whatever actually conveys what they're actually intending.
But if you then communicate and go, hey, I don't like the way you spoke to me, or I don't like the way you treat me, X, Y, Z, and you place that boundary down by saying, I'm no longer going to be putting up with this, and they turn around and go, well, you know, gaslight you and go, well, I wouldn't be treating you like this if you weren't doing that, or I would, you know.
This is why the boundaries coming backwards and forwards matter.
Yeah.
And this is why it is incumbent on the other person to be healing, or at least self-aware.
Yeah. To then go, you know, just put up with it because you're a bitch, is, you know, how, like, I would like argue that no amount of fucking grace or presence needs to be within that space. Well, I'm a stubborn ass, but
it's like with that said, like, ultimately it's got to be on your terms as to how much tolerance and patience you have. Like, how long is a piece of string? Well, I can't answer that for you any more than you can answer that for me. So I'm like, if you're a miserable cow for the next 3 months, and I'm like,
not doing it.
I'm out.
Yeah.
Why?
I'm
good.
You know.
But at the same time, who's to say that person on the other side of the conversation, like, they had that proverbial epiphany click, and that's 4.5 months down the track, whereas your tolerance is like, it's what it is.
Yeah.
Trying to put a time frame on healing is just a great way to disappoint yourself and hurt your own feelings.
You know, and that doesn't mean that those boundaries need to be looser or tighter. It just means that your own piece of string or time frame or whatever it looks like for you, once that runs out, you need to, you know, do what you need to do. Yeah. And if it is 4.5 months and they've had that epiphany, maybe that person walking out was what that needed to light that fire to go, oh, fuck, maybe I am the problem, or, you know.
Or whatever needs to wake you and them up.
Yeah. And then I'd also like to add on the flip side of that is, like, as you've mentioned before, like, how are you talking to yourself? Something that I always love to teach is that you teach people how to treat you by how you treat yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are treating yourself like trash, you have no personal boundaries around anything.
Why wouldn't people think they could get away with the
That's
exact same
it.
thing?
Well,
or worse.
You know,
Yeah.
they're like, so you, even if you don't physically say it, you project out how you feel about yourself, your self-worth, your self-love, you know, all of those sort of things. And then as you project that out, it comes out in your actions and your tone and all of those sort of things. But of course you're going to get someone come through and treat you like that because you haven't said no.
So, without wanting to sound too victim blaming, this is the only way things like gaslighting actually work.
Right.
Is that you are prepared to believe someone else's version of who you are more than who you really are. Or worse, you've just opened the floodgates and you go, I'm a piece of shit and
Yeah.
I just need this like wound buddies.
Yeah.
So this person gets to prove to me that I deserve to be treated like this and vice versa.
That's it. I'm getting treated like this because I deserve it or because
And they'll actually tell you that.
Yeah.
It's like, I wouldn't have been doing this if you weren't so weak and pathetic to be able to accept this, like, you know, like dumb stuff. But like when you're in that space.
Yeah. But so that's when like working on yourself and actually, you know, shadow work, ultimate form of self-love, actually, you know, doing things like placing boundaries down. Again, another form of self-love. You are now saying that I am worth more than that, you know, and if that keeps happening, I'm going to go do this. Now, a boundary is only as good as your willingness to enforce it. So if you turn around and say, like, if you treat me like that one more time, I'm leaving, and then that person treats you like that and you stay, your boundaries mean shit.
To you first and foremost.
Yeah.
Let alone to them.
Because they're going, well, oh, she's threatened to leave so many times, or she's threatened to do this, or she's threatened to do that, or he's threatened to do this, and they haven't done it. So clearly they can't see their own worth, and I just get to keep doing whatever the fuck I want and not take accountability for it.
And then you go into the deeper level of that and you go, your subconscious is watching you make a liar out of yourself every single fucking time. And ultimately it goes, I don't trust a word that comes out of my face.
Yeah, exactly. And
I don't trust a thought that I have about this stuff. It's like, is it any wonder people get to that place?
And you mentioned something about how like this is the way that like only gaslighting works. And I'm not entirely comfortable with how categorical I was about that, but at the same time, you know exactly what I mean. It's exactly.
Like, it wouldn't work if this wasn't true of the other person.
Exactly. And I guess in a way to reframe that to, you know, if might land a little bit better or different is the only judgment that someone else has upon you that you are affected by is the judgment that you believe yourself.
That inherent vulnerability.
Yeah.
And that's how gaslighters and narcissists work. There's that subconscious recognition of the chink in the armor at the person in front of them, and they're just like, oh, cool, I get to play with this person now because I know how to get in and press the buttons.
Because all of a sudden, all these things that they get projected on, or like you are this or you are that, and then if they turn around and like go, oh fuck, it's like, well, yeah, they found it, because if you somewhere deep down inside of yourself believe it, that's the only way it's going to affect you.
When I was talking about the relationship with food stuff a little while ago, and this is kind of what I was sort of describing, is that it takes you a little while to get to the point where you no longer believe that you can't have these things around yourself. You can have these things around yourself and be fine, because you no longer believe that you're at the whim of a fucking Tim Tam or a gaslighter, because they're nearly the same thing, right?
I can't eat Tim Tams, so
less said about that, the better then.
Yes,
but
because I used to love Tim Tams, but
well, that. But as a very throwaway example, it's like it's another example of like the Tim Tam's just a fucking Tim Tam.
Yeah,
but that giving away of power to a chocolatey biscuit is incumbent on you believing that you have no power over yourself to say no to a fucking biscuit.
You've not met women in menstrual cycles, have you?
That sounds a lot like me trying to shame people. At which point, that comment you just made is extremely fair. But menstrual cycles or not, that is still a self-others environment conversation to have, to say, what's more important? Me and what I say I want and what I do about that.
Yeah.
Or a period, or my Tim Tams, or Brad the gaslighter.
Yeah, my period and my Tim Tams, but
you know what I mean, right? It's like there are obviously different levels of impact. But
at least we're not talking about my height anymore.
You brought it up that time. That's on you. Have we sufficiently gaslit you enough that it's now a thing you're owning?
Oh, I owned I was short.
Yeah, I know.
Like, I'm 36 in a couple of weeks, so yeah. I'm cool.
You've had a little bit of time to get used to it.
Just a little bit of time to get used to it. You know, it's okay. I'm seems to be surrounding with myself with extremely tall people now, though. So I wonder what that says.
Maybe that's for the next episode. I've mentioned the word discipline a couple of times, but not really sort of gone into what I really mean about it. Because it does take discipline to establish these boundaries, to make them valuable, to make them worthwhile, because they have to matter, because otherwise they're just like cotton candy in the wind.
Exactly.
The discipline is not so much in the actions, it's in the questions that you ask yourself before the actions. The discipline is in going, how do I want to react to this? More importantly, how do I want to respond to this? Where is the value in either side of this conversation? Do I want to have a Tim Tam? Well, I do. Yeah, but why do you want? Well, I just like that they're sugary and they're chocolatey and it makes me feel better for about 10 seconds and then I have buyer's remorse. That doesn't sound that very valuable to me. Or what's the value in not having it? Well, I haven't had a Tim Tam, which means I haven't got to enjoy the experience of having a Tim Tam, but I'm not going to have buyer's remorse and I haven't had a bit of sugar and I haven't done this and I've set a boundary for myself that has established a further firming of who I am and who I choose to be and what those behaviors surrounding that look like. So like when we talk about discipline in that way, it's like, well, you get to the point where there's a level of freedom created about it. So you set your boundaries so that you can almost just put them down for a while and forget about them. You just get about being you, because after a little while, you know where your line is. Everyone else knows where your line is. No one really fucks with it at that point. Until such times as maybe that line no longer serves you and you go through this fun process again and you change it all again because maybe there's someone else in your life that challenges those boundaries, because as you grow and evolve, that's just what happens.
Yep.
That probably made sense, I hope.
Well, let's reframe it as Brad the gaslighter then.
Okay.
Because my female ass is going, but I just want the fucking Tim Tam. I have hormones.
We're going to pick on Sky in a second about why that's a female thing.
Yeah.
But
it's okay.
Point made.
I think it might be just a Sky thing, but...
No, it's not. It's just a Sky thing. Promise.
Yeah. So, Brad the gaslighter. Just fucking...
He's such a douchebag.
Such a douchebag, right? So
that's an extreme example.
Yeah.
But the ability to sort of step back a little bit,
yeah,
and have the discipline of going, what's really going on here?
Yeah.
Is there value in listening to what he says?
Yeah.
Well, if I listen to what he says, then he'll stop badgering me and berating me and belittling me.
Yeah.
And things are at least normal, inverted commas normal.
Yeah.
That's if I do what he says. If I don't do what he says, where's the value in that? Well, I get to deal with, like, I don't know, another week worth of fucking turmoil and him being a colossal bellend and a petulant child and making it my fault.
Yeah.
But I stood up for myself. Where's the value? You know what I mean? So, like, you establish where the value is, and that's how you start to pick your path. You're like, well, what do I think is more valuable for me right now?
Yeah.
And then you start to pick that path, which kind of is what draws the boundary around those behaviors.
Yeah.
Admittedly, easier said than done with Brad the douchebag gaslighter.
Yes. Because obviously there are so many different facets to, you know, Brad the gaslighter.
and unfortunately, ultimately, the more extreme this scenario, the tougher you need to be with yourself.
I wonder if you mean, like, extreme the scenarios is like how long has it gone on for?
And that's what I mean. It's like,
you know, has it been years and years and years that you've just kind of like said that I'm not happy with this behavior and then not done anything.
And then 6 years later, you're like, holy shit.
And you're still fucking here.
That's what I mean by the extremity of the depth of powerlessness, or the volume of power you've given away, or the extremity of behavior that is now being given to you. You know what I mean? Like there's a depth of lack of control over your own sense of feeling, thoughts, behaviors that demands that much more to become aware of and change and affect.
Yep. That makes sense now.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm glad you had that ending on there, because I'm pulling a face going, no. But yeah, that's it. So I guess I would even read that as like the level of depth or the level of power that you are taking back is every time you do it, because
that's
the minute that you start it, and especially if this is something that has gone on for years, and you know, you've hit that point, like in our last episode when we talked about how anger is a vital part of healing, and you've hit that fucking like, fuck you, I'm done, like I'm not doing it anymore, and you've hit that final point of no, you're gonna cop backlash. Yeah. You know, and the ability for you to, like, as you said, like take that step back and go, well, this has been 6 years of someone, or 10 years or 15 years, whatever the fucking time frame is, of this person getting away with this. You know, you're going to cop some sort of fucking tantrum, whether it's big, small, and then you're going to cop the, oh, I'm so sorry, and then you're going to cop the tantrum again. And your ability to, in each stage of that, to go, no, take power back. No, take power back. And you slowly but surely pull the string, as I'm like pulling it up an anchor in the air.
In this extremely visual format currently.
Totally extreme visual format, because it's not working.
The necessity of utilizing anger in that moment, because you need that anger to go, no, fuck you.
Yeah.
Because without it, it's like when I say things like, you've got to, where's the value?
Yeah.
It's like, well, where's the value of being angry?
Right there.
Is it to feel hopeless?
No.
And turn it in on yourself? Or is it to channel it into you're not doing this anymore?
Yeah.
It's like, that's what reinforces those boundaries. That's what helps you make that decision and step into it. So, but you've obviously got to, as you were saying, so step back and sort of pull that string.
Yeah. And keep
to
placing
find
it
where that value is actually going to lead you. Because you kind of got to almost reverse engineer this in your head in the moment. It's like, where would this go if I just kept doing this? Well, it's 6 years later and it's worse That's where it went.
Yeah.
Where would it end up in another 6 years? Well, I might be dead.
Yeah.
Because I've either got stabbed by this lunatic or I'm so over it I can't see any way out but doing something permanent to myself, which
trigger warning.
Extreme example again.
Yeah.
Or if I stood up to myself right in this moment, where would that go? And it's using that anger to survive the blowback, because it's gonna have
happen.
blowback.
Yeah.
Because you got to stay tight. You got to stay like.
Did you just pull your football? Got to stay tight.
It's a powerlifting thing anyway.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean, right? You got to stay tight. You're like, if you don't utilize that anger in that moment, it's extremely difficult to not get knocked off. But anger makes you powerful. When it's abused, it makes you toxic, but that's a completely different episode. But do you know what I mean? Yeah,
it's like, well, you said like stay tight, which is a powerlifting thing, but like something my coach says to me in Ollie is like you got to put your balls in your stomach and your heart in your throat.
Get tight.
Get tight.
That's exactly what it means.
You know, and like sort of kind of
balls and appropriate.
Mine already
ball
in my
havers
stomach.
and not.
I have a male coach, and I
get it.
It suits me. It's
nut
fine.
up or shut up.
I'm not a soft, fluffy female, so it's...
Unless it's about height.
Fuck off. Nah.
Got a bite, guys. Go us. Sorry, you were saying before you...
I don't know, before you started
talking
like
about nuts and heights
and balls
stuff.
and fucking height factors and shit. Dear. No, it's gone. Nah.
It's the analogy of getting tight. To use
that.
It's that using that anger. Getting fiery about the fact that this is not how things are going from now on.
Yeah.
Because you've seen where this shit leads. You don't want that.
No, that's it. You know. And like, well, obviously, you know, it's always very beneficial to have those, like, what I would call them like non-negotiables. You know, so like...
I call them hard rules and soft rules.
Yeah.
Like there's some stuff you can compromise on. Oh, I've made it creepy, have I?
Just a tad.
Everyone else knew what I meant. It's just Sky who's in the gutter.
Guy lives in the gutter because, you know, I'm short.
Look, I thought about making that joke, but I'm like, no, you're better than that. No. Apparently Sky's not.
No, I'm not. Just no better. No better. You know, but if you've come out of a space like that and then you're like moving into a new space, new relationship, whatever the fuck it is, like having those non-negotiables or like real boundaries, as you said, just as you form them in place is also going to be very beneficial because, hey, you know what the fuck's happened for the last 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, 50 years. And we're not doing that again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so walking into a space with those, but then also having that awareness. So I explained it to one of my clients a couple of years ago because she found that her boundaries were like all the way out there. So they were like...
She's almost overcompensated.
To the point where she wasn't allowing anyone in her life, you know, and all that sort of stuff. And I explained to her that, you know what, that's okay because of the situation that you've just left. I can completely see how, you know, protective of yourself that you have become. I want you now to work on what is 100% a no and what is one will, like as you said, like a soft rule, something that if it happens, to have the ability to have that conversation. And if that conversation then doesn't go in a healthy way, then you can put that hard limit back into place.
The analogy about getting that food out of the house, this is exactly what I meant, is that ability to go, I need this completely away from me so that I can formalize and establish the strength that I have within myself, about myself, so that I can then afford to let things back in.
Yeah. Knowing that I have the confidence and the strength to go,
yes or no.
Yes or no. Hang on a minute. No, don't like that.
That. I think we touched on it in the first couple of minutes. Having those boundaries and the ability to sort of negotiate with yourself which ones are the hard and fast or the soft and smooth ones. Yeah, that was my fault, that one.
Oh, no.
Yep, cool. That's what I said. But the absolute necessity of being able to communicate those effectively as well. Because if you can't say what you think and how you feel,
you're just going to end up at square one again.
To put it mildly, and you're probably going to end up with a lump on your forehead from bashing it against a brick wall and wondering why the fuck you're here again.
Yeah.
At which point, I would imagine most people would probably just double down on those boundaries that are way out over there, which means that less people get in, let alone close enough to see who you really are again.
And that's not necessarily helpful either.
Do you want friends? Do you want a partner? Because that's the necessity of finding out where your boundaries exist for them and for you, coming and going. Which energy you let in, which energy you let out. You get to choose. But that's kind of why that discipline needs to be an ongoing process. It's all well and good to like create those patterns of behavior and thought and belief about what you do so that you can sort of put them down and live your life free. You don't have to keep making that decision. But it's always a valuable thing to sort of check in with them occasionally and go, is this still serving me? Is this who I still feel like I am? Is this still valuable to who I am and who I'm becoming? Do I want different things? Do I want more things?
Yeah.
So that you can review them and go, well, I'm tired of keeping people at arm's length. I don't have any friends. I would like to have a partner I can share my life with, for example, just as those things. I want a squad.
A squad.
Posse.
Tribe.
All of the above. But without the ability to be authentically you and the conviction to just be that version of you, boundaries end up being prisons.
Yeah.
And what we were saying a little while ago about like people want to form these lines and dividing rules around themselves. They use people and things and jobs and sport teams that they follow to establish how the world works. It's like you don't want to be too enclosed, but you also don't want to be just like untethered flying through the universe on a giant ball of rock around a giant fireball and having no day-to-day tangibility to who you are either.
Yep.
How was that for a tangent?
That was a good one.
Okay, I'll take that. I guess ultimately it's just being present and mindful of yourself. It's that self-awareness that it inevitably always boils down to.
Right,
like,
that's it. But then also, like, that self-awareness, but then also, and this comes from like a people pleaser mindset, you know, because the totally awesome, amazing ability that the people pleaser has is that self-awareness to the point they're not necessarily aware of themselves. They're aware of fucking everything else around them.
That's how you get to the extremity of that place, right?
Right.
Like
you know,
you're just non-existent in the face of
and
people.
Something that I like to really talk about a lot is, you know, not using someone else's past trauma behavior as an excuse for shitty behavior. So it's like, well, why is that person treating you like that? Oh, he's just had a hard life, or oh, she's just had a hard this, or, you know, whatever the case may be.
There's being understanding, and then there's letting them take the piss.
That's it. Like, you know, like as you said, like what level of oh dear. You know, to what level? Like, and that's why I was trying, when I teach people when they're breaking people pleaser, you know, when they're changing that behavior, when they're integrating that other part of them that they have disconnected, is that trauma is not an excuse for shitty behavior. It's a fucking fantastic that you can see that that person's past upbringing, traumas has shaped them to be that way, but ultimately they have to take responsibility for that and choose to either stay the same or do something about it and change the patterns and pathways, just as you are right now, because clearly getting kicked in the teeth is no longer serving you.
Run out of teeth.
You know, so it's not an excuse and it's not a reason to put up with shitty behaviour. Yes, it may be required for patience and tolerance if, as we said at the start of this episode, if someone is actively working on themselves, there's a different level there, and you will find that people will have a lot more tolerance and a lot more patience if you are actively changing and working on yourself. The people that actually care. Now, this goes to a point of like, you know, kind and not nice.
Yeah.
You know, the people that are kind are the people that are going to tell you that you're being a shithead. You know, you're like, dude, you're being an asshole. Fucking do something about it. You know, and the people that are being nice is,
it's placatory.
You know, that's just who you are, and you just need to find someone that is going to accept you for who you are and put up with it.
The fact that that person has to say put up with it,
right?
Is a bit of a tell.
Exactly.
In that even that nice person is telling on you and going, they have to put up with it. What does that person who's being nice to you really think about that bullshit? Because they're framing it as put up with it.
You know, so the same goes. Like, don't excuse someone else's abuse of you as that's just who they are. They've just had a hard life. Like, I just have to put up with it because I love them.
So
fucking no, you don't.
That this conversation and the sort of, you know, that's shit who I am, deal with it. There was another version of it. It was like, you don't owe anyone an explanation. I find it a similar sort of conversation in that, like, no, you don't owe anyone an explanation.
But if you're actively treating someone like trash, then yes, I'm sorry, you fucking owe them
or
an
just like,
explanation.
if you don't explain yourself, not to, like, you know, you're not doing it to placate that. Well, you are trying to do it to placate them. But if this person matters to you and you just blank them for like 3 weeks because you're going through some stuff, why wouldn't they sit there and think, I guess we're not friends anymore, or something like that? And then obviously when that person gets on the other side of stuff and they go, oh, no, I don't owe anyone an explanation. It's like, what are they supposed to think? It's like, cool, that you just disappear for 3 weeks and then I'm just supposed to deal with that.
Deal with it, yeah.
It's like, if you communicated what you're going through, that's fine.
Yeah.
It's okay. I at least understand, so that I'm not going to sit here and just rattle my brain going, did I piss them off?
Yeah.
Are they living a double life and they're in Europe as a secret agent and James Bond's got his days numbered? You know what I mean? Like, this is that counterbalance, like realizing there's two people in this conversation, and that's ultimately what communication is. So who's more important, the person talking or the person listening? It's like, well, if the person listening isn't hearing what's being said, it's just some dude in a room talking. Cool. How's that helping anyone? Or worse, not saying anything, and then there's just two people just looking at each other awkwardly.
Yeah, that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So ultimately, it's an energetic exchange. What energy are you exchanging? What are you getting back? Are you happy with that?
Yeah. And whatever rhyme, reason, or why to about if you're not happy with that, still doesn't make that okay. You know, and that's where looking in yourself, looking outside of yourself and going, is this actually fucking what I'm, you know, I'll be living in beige.
Yeah. Beige.
Beige.
Exactly that.
Fucking beige. Or am I willing to say no and place those boundaries down and go, I'm not dealing with this anymore, or I'm not putting up with this anymore unless, you know, and if you want to ultimate, I'm not here to tell you what to do and what not to do, but
sometimes that's healthy, sometimes it's not.
yeah, so like depending on
you
pick and choose, but like a good enforcement of a boundary is if you don't do something, you know, about XYZ by XYZ, then I'm going to be doing this.
Yeah.
You know, and if that person doesn't do this and then that by that time, then you do that. You enforce that. You enforce that boundary by saying, well, no, I'm now choosing myself. I'm now choosing what I want and what I need and all of those sort of things.
When I work with people, ultimately it kind of boils down to, like, I think I mentioned this before, it's like, who are you and what do you want?
Yeah.
Because if you don't have any, at least vague idea of who you are, it's very difficult to figure out what you want. If you don't know what you want, how do you go and get it?
Yeah.
How do you tell people what you want? How do you establish boundaries around that? Like, how do you actually do the things that we're talking about? And this is why that self-awareness is like, well, exactly what you said. It's like, I don't want this. Good.
Yeah.
That's a start. What do you want? Well, this. All right, well, let's make decisions that move us
that way.
In that direction.
Yeah.
Because why else am I here? Is it to hang out with Brad the gaslighter? Is it to be shamed about liking Tim Tams or how tall you are? No.
Well, that's it. Ultimately, you choose who you want to be and hang around with. And you choose who to be in relationships with. You choose what you want and how and what that looks like.
And the very use of the word choose is dependent on you having the power within yourself to do that. And to have that power, you have to take it, especially if it's been taken from you or you've given it away.
Yeah.
Because you think that's what you need to do to get friends and likes and
love, like, and acceptance.
All of the above.
Did we tangent long enough?
Well, that's I think that's a current record for time tangented.
Well, then next episode's going to be a doozy.
Have we just put pressure on ourselves?
No, but what we were talking about beforehand, like, it's going to be a doozy.
Yeah. Look forward to it, guys.
Yes, I look forward to it too. And we'd be expanding more on different areas of boundaries and self-advocatory versus selfishness and fucking narcissism, people-pleasing, fucking all the things.
We touched on it, the difference between niceness and kindness.
Yeah.
This is going to be one of those things. It's like, well, why are you kind? Because I can be.
Yeah.
Why am I nice? Because I might get something out of it. That's a very crass oversimplification of it, but have I just ruined the episode?
That's okay.
Yeah, okay. All right, cool. That's Sky being kind.
You're good.
All right.
Be good.
Be kind.
I forgot the other one.
Be your best you.
No bar fights.
See you guys.
See ya.